Let me ask you something, and I want you to be honest with yourself for a second. Have you ever held $100 bill in your hand and wondered what actually makes it worth $100? It's just paper, cotton and linen, really. And yet entire lives are built around it, marriages strained by it, dreams delayed because of it, retirement saved or destroyed by it. Here's the truth. Almost nobody told you growing up. The money in your wallet isn't worth anything on its own. It never was. What gives it value is something far more fragile and far more powerful. Something you can't see, can't touch, and yet controls every single price you pay. And once you understand what that thing is, you start to see the financial world differently. You start to notice patterns that were always there, hiding in plain sight. Let me show you the blueprint, because if you're over 40 and you've worked hard your whole life, this is the conversation nobody had with you, and it's time somebody did. So let's start where everybody should have started, but almost nobody did. What gives money its value? Not the paper, not the ink, not even the little signature of some treasury secretary most people couldn't name if their life depended on it. What gives a dollar its value is trust. That's it. That's the whole secret. Trust in the country behind it. Trust in the economy that produces, builds, innovates, and pays its bills. When that trust is strong, the dollar stands tall. When that trust cracks, so does everything priced in dollars. Think about it for a second. Why does the American dollar carry more weight around the world than, say, the currency of a country you'd have to look up on a map? It's not magic. It's not destiny. It's production. It's stability. It's the belief that the United States will still be standing tomorrow, next year, 10 years from now, honoring what it owes and producing what it promises. And here's where most people get it wrong. They think money has a fixed value. They think a dollar is a dollar is a dollar. But money is alive. It breathes. It moves. Every single day, currencies compete against each other like companies fighting for customers in a crowded market. Political decisions, trade deals, wars, elections, interest rates, the mood of investors halfway across the world, all of it affects what your money is actually worth. Now, I want you to picture something. Imagine there are 10 apples in a town and $10 circulating. Each apple costs $1. Simple, fair, makes sense. Now imagine someone, let's call him the government, decides to print $90 more and hand them out. Suddenly there are $100 chasing 10 apples. Guess what happens? The apples don't become more valuable. The dollars become less valuable. Each apple now costs $10. Same apple, same tree, same farmer, but your money buys 10 times less of it. That's inflation. That's what happens when governments treat the printing press like a magic wand. And that's the trap millions of Americans over 40 walked into without ever being told the rules of the game. You worked hard. You saved. You did what your parents told you to do. You put money in the bank, stayed loyal to one company for 30 years, paid your taxes on time, and somewhere along the way, you started noticing something strange. The dollar in your pocket didn't buy what it used to. Groceries that cost $40 now cost $100. A tank of gas that filled up for $20 now drains $50. The house your parents bought for $30,000 now sells for $600,000. And your savings? They sit there, quietly losing ground while the world keeps getting more expensive. This isn't bad luck. This isn't you falling behind. This is the system working exactly the way it was designed to work. The dollar you saved 10 years ago is not the same dollar today. It's been slowly, quietly, politely robbed of its purchasing power. And nobody sent you a notice. Nobody called to explain. You just noticed. Here's the part that hurts. Most people spend their entire working lives trying to earn more dollars without ever stopping to ask whether those dollars are actually keeping their value. They chase the number on the paycheck. They celebrate the raise. They feel proud when the savings account crosses a milestone. But the real game isn't about having more dollars. The real game is about holding something that doesn't lose value while you sleep. You don't need more money. You need a better plan. And a better plan starts with understanding that your dollar is only as strong as the trust behind it. If you don't know how that trust is built, how it's measured, how it can be shaken, then you're playing a game without knowing the rules. And in a game without rules, the house always wins. So let me ask you again, that $100 bill in your wallet, do you really know what you're holding? Because the people at the top of this system do. They've known it for decades, and everything they build, their wealth, their freedom, their legacy, is built on understanding what most people never bother to learn. And we're just getting started. Because the next piece of this puzzle is even bigger than inflation. It's something every single country does. Something that sounds scary when you first hear about it. But once you understand it, the entire financial world starts making sense in a way it never did before. National debt. Two words that make people nervous. Two words that politicians throw around on television like a warning of the apocalypse. Two words that, if you're over 40, you've probably heard your entire adult life without anyone ever stopping to explain what they actually mean. So let me ask you something simple. When you hear that the United States owes 30-something trillion, who exactly does it owe that money to? Some mysterious banker in a tower, a secret council, China, Russia, the Illuminati, if you listen to certain corners of the internet? The answer is far less dramatic and far more interesting. Countries don't owe money to one single creditor. They owe it to millions of people and institutions. They owe it to pension funds, to insurance companies, to foreign governments, to hedge funds, to mutual funds. And yes, a huge portion of that debt is owed to their own citizens, to people like you, to people who bought bonds, to people with retirement accounts, to people whose pensions are invested in treasury securities without them ever knowing it. Here's how it actually works. When a government needs money, and they always need money, they don't just print it out of thin air. Well, sometimes they do, and we already talked about how that ends. What they usually do is issue something called a bond. A bond is nothing more than a promise. The government says, lend me $1,000 today, and in 10 years, I'll give you back your $1,000, plus some interest along the way. People and institutions buy those promises because they trust the country will keep its word. And this is where it gets fascinating. That debt almost never gets fully paid off. Not really. What happens is that when one bond comes due, the government issues a new bond to pay off the old one. It's a constant rolling cycle. New promises paying off old promises. And this works. It actually works beautifully, as long as one thing remains intact. Trust. If the world still believes the country is good for it, the cycle continues forever. People keep lending. The country keeps rolling. Nobody blinks. But the second that belief cracks, the second investors start wondering whether the next payment will actually come, the whole thing wobbles. Interest rates spike, the currency weakens, and suddenly the country that looked invincible is scrambling. That's why you'll hear economists obsess over things like credibility and confidence and ratings. Because in the world of national debt, perception isn't just reality, perception is the entire foundation. Now, let me bring this closer to home. Because this isn't just a lesson about governments, this is a lesson about you. How many people do you know who treat their personal finances like a country with no credibility? They borrow and borrow, not because they're using debt strategically, but because they can't face the truth of their spending. They roll credit card balances from one card to another, promising themselves next month will be different. And for a while it works, until the trust runs out, until the banks tighten up, until the interest eats them alive. This is where most people get it wrong. They think debt itself is the enemy. It isn't. Debt is a tool. A hammer can build a house or break a window, depending on who's swinging it. The rich have known this forever. They use debt to buy assets that grow in value faster than the interest they pay. They borrow against what they own to invest in what will make them more. They never sell their good assets if they don't have to, because selling means taxes, and taxes mean a smaller pile tomorrow. Meanwhile, the average person over 40 often uses debt to buy things that lose value. A new car that depreciates the moment it leaves the lot. A vacation financed over 18 months. A kitchen renovation on a home equity line. Same tool. Completely different result. And I'm not saying this to make you feel bad. I'm saying it because nobody ever showed you the difference. Nobody sat you down at 25 and said, "Listen, here's how debt really works, and here's the line between the kind that builds you and the kind that buries you. You don't need more money. You need a better plan, because once you understand that every country, every bank, every wealthy family in America is playing this same game with debt and trust and time, you start to realize something uncomfortable. The rules were never hidden. They were just never taught, not in school, not at home, not on the nightly news. But there's another piece of this puzzle that almost nobody sees coming. Something most people assume is good, but actually signals economic disaster. Deflation. It sounds harmless, doesn't it? It even sounds good. Prices going down, groceries cheaper next month, gas cheaper next year, your money stretching further without you having to lift a finger. If inflation is the villain everyone fears, shouldn't deflation be the hero? That's what most people think, and that's exactly where most people get it wrong. Because deflation, when it truly takes hold of an economy, isn't a blessing. It's a slow, quiet killer. It's the kind of economic disease that doesn't announce itself with sirens. It creeps in, it whispers, it convinces everyone that waiting is smarter than acting. And then one morning, an entire country wakes up to find the engine has stopped. Let me show you the blueprint. Imagine you're thinking about buying a new refrigerator. Yours is old, it's making strange noises, but it still works. Now imagine someone tells you with certainty that the same fridge will cost 10% less in 6 months. What do? You wait. Of course you wait. Anybody in their right mind would wait. Now multiply that decision by 300 million Americans across every product, every service, every industry. Cars, houses, appliances, vacations, everything. When everyone waits, everyone stops buying. When everyone stops buying, companies stop selling. When companies stop selling, they stop hiring. They start firing. Factories slow down. Stores close. Paychecks shrink or disappear entirely. And here's the cruel part. The people who just lost their jobs now have even less money to spend, which means even less buying, which means even more firings. That's the spiral. That's why economists lose sleep over deflation, because once it starts, it feeds itself. And no amount of cheap prices matters when nobody has a paycheck to spend. Japan learned this lesson the hard way. For nearly 3 decades, their economy sat stuck in this exact trap. Prices flat or falling, wages flat. Young people afraid to buy homes, afraid to start families, afraid to take any risk at all. An entire generation grew up assuming tomorrow would be a little worse than today. And when a whole country starts thinking that way, the damage runs deeper than any spreadsheet can measure. Now here's where I want you to stop and think. If you're over 40, you've lived through moments when prices dropped and it felt like relief. Gas prices falling, housing dipping after a crash. And in small doses, yes, it can feel good. But a healthy economy doesn't run on falling prices, it runs on steady, gentle growth, a little inflation, a little movement, enough to keep people buying, building, hiring, hoping. This is one of those moments where what feels good and what is good are two very different things. And I'll take it a step further. This same principle applies to your own financial life. How many people do you know who are always waiting? Waiting for the market to drop before they invest. Waiting for the perfect house before they buy. Waiting for the right moment to start their business, change careers, sit down with their spouse, and finally talk about money. Waiting, waiting, waiting. Because surely things will be clearer tomorrow. Surely the fog will lift. Surely the timing will be better next quarter. And while they wait, life moves. The market climbs without them. The house they loved gets bought by somebody else. The business idea they had for years shows up on a television interview with someone else's face attached to it. Their own personal deflation spiral, waiting for a better price on life, costs them the one thing they can't print more of: time. If you fix this, everything changes. Because the economy of a country and the economy of a single life, they follow the same laws. Motion creates wealth. Hesitation drains it. Not reckless motion, not gambling, but deliberate, informed, consistent motion. The kind that compounds quietly in the background while the people waiting for a perfect signal never actually move. And this brings us to something every American over 40 has felt in their bones, whether they can name it or not. Something that's changed dramatically in one generation. Something that used to be simple and now feels almost impossible for an ordinary person to achieve: owning a home. Because the story of how housing went from a basic goal to a luxury asset tells you almost everything you need to know about how this whole system really works and who it really works for. Your father, or your grandfather, or maybe an uncle you remember from childhood. One income, one job, one man walking through the door at 6 in the evening with a lunchbox in his hand. And somehow, on that single paycheck, a house got bought, a family got fed, a car sat in the driveway, kids went to school, a modest vacation once a year, maybe to the coast, maybe to a lake, nothing fancy. But it worked. Now look around today, 2 incomes, sometimes 3 if you count the side hustle, college degrees on the wall, more hours worked than any generation before, and a house, a simple, ordinary house with 3 bedrooms and a patch of grass in the back, feels like it's drifting further away every year. What happened? This is where most people get it wrong. They blame themselves. They think they made poor choices. They didn't save enough. They bought the wrong car. They took the wrong job. And sure, personal decisions matter. But something much bigger happened underneath all of it, and nobody over 40 should go another day without understanding what it was. Housing stopped being just housing. Somewhere along the way, a home stopped being a place to live and became a financial asset, a thing to trade, a thing to invest in, a thing to flip. Wall Street noticed. Hedge funds noticed. Foreign buyers noticed. Suddenly, the house on your block wasn't competing against other families who wanted to live there. It was competing against a corporation in another state buying 50 houses at once with cash to rent them back to the very people who couldn't afford to buy them. On top of that, credit got easier. Interest rates danced up and down. Banks handed out mortgages like candy in certain decades and then tightened up like a vault in others. Cities made it harder to build new homes. Zoning laws froze entire neighborhoods in time. Demand kept climbing. Supply couldn't catch up. And the result? A $30,000 home in 1975 is a $600,000 home today. Meanwhile, wages, real wages, adjusted for what a dollar actually buys, barely moved. That's not a coincidence. That's not bad luck. That's the math of an entire system that quietly shifted beneath your feet while you were busy raising kids and paying bills. Now here's the part that most people don't want to hear, but I'm going to say it anyway because you're old enough to handle the truth. The rules changed. And nobody announced it. Your parents played a game where one honest income could buy a life. You're playing a game where income alone, no matter how hard you work, may never be enough. Because the people who win the housing game today aren't just the ones who earn. They're the ones who own. They're the ones who understood early that the house isn't just shelter, it's leverage. It's an asset. It's a seat at the table. And that's the heart of this whole thing. You don't need more money. You need a better plan. Because if you keep thinking of your home the way your grandfather did, as a place to live, paid off slowly, then kept quietly for decades, you're playing by rules that don't exist anymore. I'm not saying that's good. I'm not celebrating it. I'm just telling you what's real. The world your parents bought their house in is gone. The world you're trying to buy one in plays by a completely different set of rules. And this isn't a reason to despair. It's a reason to finally see clearly. Because when you stop blaming yourself and start understanding the machine, something powerful happens. You stop chasing. You stop panicking. You stop comparing your life at 50 to your father's life at 30. You start looking at the game the way the winners look at it. Calmly, patiently, strategically. You start asking different questions. Not, how do I earn more? But, how do I own more? Not, how do I save harder? But, where do I put what I save so it doesn't rot in a bank account losing value every single year? Not, why can't I afford what my parents afforded? But, what did they have that I don't have? And how do I build it from where I stand today? These aren't small questions. They're the questions that separate the people who retire tired from the people who retire free. And there's one more distinction inside all of this. A distinction that costs most people their life savings without them ever noticing. The difference between two things that look almost identical from the outside, but lead to completely opposite destinations. Trading and investing. Say those two words out loud to most people, and they'll nod like they mean the same thing. They don't. Not even close. And the confusion between these two has emptied more retirement accounts in America than almost any other financial mistake I can think of. Let me show you the blueprint. Trading is a sprint. Investing is a marathon. Trading is trying to guess what the price of something will do in the next hour, the next day, the next week. It's reading charts, watching screens, jumping in and out, trying to catch small waves before they break. Investing is putting your money into something solid. A business, a piece of real estate, a broad basket of companies, and letting time do the heavy lifting. Years, decades, generations if you're serious about it. Here's what nobody tells you. The people selling you the dream of getting rich quick are almost never the ones who got rich that way themselves. They got rich selling the dream, selling the course, selling the software, selling the newsletter, selling the idea that you, sitting at your kitchen table at 53, can outsmart institutions with billion-dollar computers and armies of analysts who've done this for 30 years. The statistics are brutal. The overwhelming majority of people who try to trade actively lose money. Not some of them, most of them. And many of the ones who win for a while eventually give it all back, and then some, because the one trade that wipes them out is always waiting around the corner. Meanwhile, the quiet investor, the one who buys steadily, holds patiently, reinvests dividends, ignores the noise, that person tends to build real wealth, boring wealth, slow wealth, the kind nobody brags about at dinner parties because there's nothing exciting to say. I bought, I held, I kept buying. That's the whole story. And yet that boring story is what pays for grandchildren's educations and houses in the mountains and quiet mornings without an alarm clock. This is where most people get it wrong. They confuse motion with progress. They think if they're not doing something dramatic, they're not doing anything at all. But in investing, doing nothing is often the most powerful thing you can do. Sitting still while the world panics, holding on while others sell in fear, buying more when everyone else is running for the exits. Now let me tie this to something we touched on earlier. Debt. Remember how I told you the rich use debt differently? This is where it starts to click. Wealthy families don't borrow money to trade. They borrow money to hold. They use low-interest debt to acquire assets, real estate, businesses, stock portfolios, and then they let those assets grow quietly for decades. They don't sell because selling means taxes. They borrow against what they own, live on the borrowed money, and let the underlying assets keep appreciating. Same tool, debt, that destroys the average American is the same tool that compounds a wealthy family's empire. The difference isn't the tool, it's the understanding behind it. And here's a thought I want you to sit with for a moment. If you're over 40, you have something the 25-year-olds on social media don't have. You have perspective. You've seen booms. You've seen crashes. You've watched friends chase hot stocks and hot houses and hot coins, and you've watched some of them win big for a season and lose it all in the next. You've seen what works and what doesn't, not from a textbook, but from life. That perspective is an asset, maybe the most valuable one you have, and it's exactly what protects you from the noise that eats younger investors alive. You don't need more money. You need a better plan. A plan that separates what you'll touch in 5 years from what you'll touch in 20. A plan that knows the difference between speculation and ownership. A plan that treats your money not as something to gamble, but as something to position. Because positioning, not prediction, is what quietly builds wealth while everyone else is busy trying to outsmart the market. And speaking of perception, speaking of confidence, speaking of how this entire financial system holds itself together, there's one more thing I want to show you before we close this out. Something that's reshaping money in real time, whether you've paid attention to it or not. Something that started as a joke to most serious people and is now sitting in the portfolios of some of the biggest institutions in the world. And it changes the answer to the very first question I asked you tonight. What is money really? Before I get into this next piece, and trust me, this is one of the most important parts of the whole conversation, I want to pause for just a moment. If you've made it this far into the video with me, if you're still here, still thinking, still connecting the dots, I want to invite you to subscribe to our channel and walk with us every single day. This is the kind of conversation we have here. No noise, no hype, no pretending, just straight talk about money, life, and the things nobody else is willing to say out loud. And I'll tell you something honestly, if you're over 40 and you're still sitting here, still listening, still trying to learn, you're already in a smaller group than you think. Most people your age stopped being curious about money a long time ago. They decided it was too late, too complicated, too far gone. You didn't. That tells me something about you. It tells me you're not done yet, and neither am I. Now let's get back to it, because what I'm about to tell you might be the most important shift in money in the last 50 years. Bitcoin. I know. Some of you just tensed up. Some of you rolled your eyes. Some of you have a son or a nephew who tried to explain it at Thanksgiving and left you more confused than when the conversation started. That's fine. Stay with me, because you don't need to buy Bitcoin to understand what it's telling us about money. Remember the very first thing I said tonight? That money is built on trust. That a dollar is only worth what people believe it's worth. Bitcoin was born out of a question, a dangerous question. What if we built a form of money that didn't require trusting any government at all? What if the rules were written into the code itself, and no politician, no central bank, no emergency committee could ever change them? That's the idea. A fixed supply. Only 21 million of them. Ever. No president can print more. No crisis can dilute them. No election can change the math. The scarcity isn't a promise. It's programmed. Now, whether Bitcoin ends up being the future of money or a footnote in history or something in between, I'm not here to predict. Nobody honest can. What I'm here to tell you is that the existence of Bitcoin, the fact that it exists at all, is a signal. A signal that millions of people around the world are starting to ask questions about money that previous generations never thought to ask. And this is where it gets personal. If you're over 40, you grew up in a world where the dollar was unquestionable. You didn't debate it. You didn't doubt it. You worked, you earned, you saved, and the system held. But your kids, your grandkids, they're growing up in a world where the old assumptions are being tested in real time. And whether you like it or not, the conversation about what money even is happening all around you. This is where most people get it wrong. They treat this stuff as if it's optional knowledge, as if it's for young people, as if it doesn't apply to them. But understanding how money is evolving isn't optional anymore. not if you want to protect what you've built, not if you want to make sense of the next 20 years. And here's the deeper truth. You don't have to invest in Bitcoin. You don't have to buy a single coin. But you do have to understand why it exists. Because the same force that gave birth to it, the slow erosion of trust in traditional money, is the same force that's quietly reshaping everything. Real estate, stocks, gold, bonds, your retirement account. Every asset you own is being repriced every year by a world that trusts the old system a little less than the year before. If you fix this, everything changes. Because once you understand that trust is the foundation of everything financial, you stop being a passenger and start being a pilot. You stop reacting to headlines. You stop panicking at every market dip. You start reading the world the way the people at the top read it. Calmly, strategically, without drama. And all of this, every single thing we've talked about tonight, from the dollar in your wallet to the house on your street, to the bonds held in your retirement account to the Bitcoin on somebody's phone, all of it circles back to one truth. One truth that nobody ever sat you down and explained. One truth that once you see it, changes the way you look at money forever. And that's exactly where we're going next. So here we are, at the end of a long conversation. And I want you to take a breath before we close this out. Because everything we've talked about tonight, the dollar, the debt, the deflation, the houses, the trading, the investing, the Bitcoin, the whole machine, all of it points to one single truth. A truth that sits quietly underneath every transaction, every price tag, every paycheck, every retirement account in this country. Money is not physical. Money is psychological. That $100 bill in your wallet isn't worth anything because of the paper. It's worth something because millions of people at the same moment have agreed to believe it's worth something. The houses on your street aren't expensive because of bricks and wood. They're expensive because of stories, expectations, credit systems, and the weight of collective belief. The debt of nations doesn't function because of gold in a vault. It functions because of trust, rolled forward year after year, generation after generation. Once you see this, you can't unsee it. And this is the part that matters most to you. Because if money is built on perception and trust and behavior, then the people who understand how perception and trust and behavior work are the ones who quietly win this game. Not the loudest, not the richest to start, not the luckiest. The ones who understand. You've spent most of your adult life working for money, trading hours for dollars, chasing promotions, stretching paychecks, paying bills, fixing cars, raising kids, and there's honor in that. Real honor. But somewhere along the way, most people over 40 start feeling something they can't quite name. A tiredness that sleep doesn't fix. A sense that despite decades of hard work, the finish line keeps moving. That feeling isn't weakness, it's information. It's your instincts telling you that working harder inside a system you don't understand will never be enough. And the difference, the real difference, the one I want you to carry with you after this video ends, is this. Some people spend their whole lives working for money. Others at some point stop and learn how money actually works. And from that moment on, they stop chasing it. They start positioning themselves inside of it. They stop being used by the system. They start using the system the way it was always meant to be used by the people who understood its rules. It's not about becoming greedy. It's not about becoming cold. It's not about turning your back on the values that got you this far. It's about finally being awake, finally seeing the board, finally knowing why the pieces move the way they do. You've earned that. You've waited long enough for that. And here's what I want to ask of you before you go. If anything in this video moved something in you, if anything made you stop and think, if even one idea here sounded like something you wish you'd heard 20 years ago, subscribe to this channel. Walk with us. We have these conversations every single day, and they only get deeper from here. Then do one more thing. Share this video with 5 people who matter to you. 5 people over 40, over 50, over 60. 5 people who deserve to hear this before it's too late to put it to use. Your brother, your sister, an old friend from work, a neighbor, a cousin you haven't called in a while. Send it. Don't explain it. Just send it. Let the video do the talking. And finally, leave me a comment. A real one. Not a polite one. A real one. Tell me where you are in this journey. Tell me what hit you hardest. Tell me what you wish you'd understood at 30 that you're only understanding now. And tell me what you want me to talk about next. What's the question you've been carrying around your whole life about money that nobody has ever answered honestly for you? I read them. And the next video we make just might be the one you asked for. Take care of yourself. Take care of the people who count on you. And remember something. The dollar in your pocket will change. The markets will change. The houses, the rates, the currencies, the technology, all of it will keep changing. But the person holding the dollar, that's the only variable you actually control. Make that one count.